Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat the designer, Courtney Cronin, still up at Halas doing all the work in the world. Clearly, I'm not. I had to come see mom, so mom's good. She says hi. Shout out to the world out there. We got a lot to break down from OTAs, Courtney. Ben Johnson doing something very different, a couple of things I should say, very differently right off of the bat. Long practice and getting ahead of questions that he knows we're going to ask in the press conference. Very different vibes there. Want to react to that. Also, Luther Burden dealing with some injury. Get our thoughts on that. Ben Johnson, fiery at practice today. Very fiery, and was not thrilled with some of the mistakes that the team was making. We'll talk about all that and more on today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Courtney, how are you today?
I'm good. It was nice to, be back at Halas for football. I mean, it's football in shorts, but it is football nonetheless. And you got to see majority of the rookie class integrate with the rest of the roster. And, our first time seeing Ben Johnson in a real full squad practice. There's 90 guys out there, 91, I believe, where the Bears roster is right now. It definitely had an edge to it today. I think that's a fair way to kind of classify it.
I love how all of us were there. Is like, so there's a moment in practice for you guys who don't get to be there at home where, normally special teams is kind of like, all right, start getting yourself ready. They're going to shuffle us out of there. So Richard Hightower's going through it. We see Tory Taylor boom a couple of punts. They do a couple field goal things. We're like, all right. And then 20 minutes pops back up on the clock. And I swear you collectively looked around at everybody in the room and just went like, all right, I guess we're still here. An exceptionally long practice from Ben Johnson today. I think you said probably just under 2 hours for day one of OTA. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I think it was, we went out there, it started for us 12:35. We were definitely out there, an hour and 15, maybe an hour and 30 minutes. Like that's, for an OTA practice where they're going through a lot of reps and they're going through a lot of instruction. This was day 2 of the install. So it probably felt longer to us just because they were making mistakes. They were going through it at a slower pace, but you did get a chance to see a good bit of instruction going on, which, that's what I want to learn in the spring. What does the coaching look like? What does Ben Johnson look like in a practice? And, for the 4th time now, because we had 3 rookie minicamp practices and now an OTA practice, I have a hard time finding him out there. Like I have my binoculars and he blends in because he's got the ball cap on and, the same Bears navy blue hoodie and sweats that everybody else has. It's hard to find him from time to time. So like I was looking at different position groups today and you'd see, okay, he'd be with the receivers. And then after, the team drill, when they were working with, then they went into special 7-on-7, they went into special teams before the final 7-on-7. I watched him go up with Caleb Williams, walk the length of the field, like watching their interactions. Like you just try to read body language at this time of the year because while there is instruction going on and that's important, it's still like the fundamental rudimentary stuff that's going to look, for their sake, they hope it looks a lot different in a couple of months. But it was a good like introductory phase for those of us covering the team to get a chance to see what Ben Johnson's like and how different these practices feel. Because Matt Eberflus had some pretty intense practices in the offseason. But the whole idea of mistakes being corrected right away, like I have been wanting to see this happen in real time because players have been talking about it ad nauseum for about 8 months.
I was gonna say.
if not, before that, but like, you think about all of the dots that you could connect back to last offseason when guys were telling us, things might have been looked past, mistakes might have been, washed over in OTAs because they thought, hey, it's OTAs, it's going to happen. But well, Ben Johnson told us today that he felt like they're making mistakes like they should. Seeing him correct things in real time, like when he, yelled at Cole Kmet because Cole wasn't lined up properly for a 7-on-7 moment in 7-on-7, I thought was, putting your money where your mouth is, because that is what he told us he was going to do. That's what players have been asking for throughout this offseason and dating back to last season. And you're getting to see what those two things look like when they meld together. And I think that that's a welcome sign for these players, knowing that they are getting what they asked for.
No, 100%. I think that, seeing Ben Johnson go out there on a consistent basis and correct the issues. And what the heck happened to my camera right now? Seeing Ben Johnson,
you all of a sudden disappeared. I don't know where you went, but here you are.
I'm back. Seeing Ben Johnson go out there and correct the issues and deal with the deal with those moments right as they happened. And in some moments, I thought this was big as well. Not letting the moment happen, not letting the play get run. No, get back in the huddle, run it again. You're not in the right spot. You got to call this the right way. Going not just at Cole Kmet, but at Caleb Williams. I thought that was a very, very big takeaway and a very big difference from what we've seen out of Bears coaching staffs in the past, where, a mistake may happen and you call out the mistake. Not to say that they're never going to, call out the mistake that Matt Eberflus never did, but I don't think we ever saw, and I mean, there was a lot of practices. I can't remember all of them. I don't think we ever saw Matt Eberflus go, do not run the play, get back in the huddle, start it from the beginning again. This is where we need to get these details right. And that's what it seemed like Ben Johnson was doing on the field. And that's what a lot of the players talked about when they talked about his intensity after in the press conference.
And he was spending time with different position groups too, which of course you're the head coach, you're going to do that. Now we've heard about, behind the scenes, what's he doing with the defense? Like, he's a first-time head coach. So that's why he hired Dennis Allen. Let Dennis Allen, who is a two-time head coach and defensive coordinator, let him handle the defense. How often is he in those meeting rooms? I imagine he probably stops by from time to time, but that's DA's domain. And Tremaine Edmonds, I believe, talked about that as well this afternoon. But like, seeing today, when you get a chance, we're in the indoor practice facility, so there's an easier way when you're standing up top to like look and see, all right, where's he moving? Where is he? How much is he interacting with Caleb Williams? What other position groups is he interacting with? What do the drills look like? All of those things are a good way to test, like, what is Ben Johnson up against this rookie year for himself as a head coach. And, just seeing him move, I think, is an interesting, to get a feel for what type of coach he's going to be. If you're detail oriented, your eyes have to be a lot of different places, and they can't be everywhere, but seeing instruction from him. We didn't get to see the hands-on stuff today, because he obviously, like, when he's on the walkie-talkie, when he's calling a play into Caleb Williams, like, I want to see more of that. I want to see like what happens when something breaks down, when something doesn't go right. And that example from 7-on-7 with Cole Kmet, I think, is a prime example of that, of like, all right, somebody wasn't lined up properly. Like, before you even run the play, like, hey, get over here, whatever he said to him, line up this way. And then there was another one where I think Caleb, I can't remember, it was a run play. And I think something happened. It wasn't like a fumbled, like a botched snap or, fumble handoff, anything like that. There was just something, maybe the wrong read. I wasn't entirely sure what happened, but the result was it was a run play. And there was, that was the first time I noticed that Ben Johnson, like, kind of like not necessarily raised his voice at him, because I'm sure, like, it's loud out there. You've got to shout, you've got to make yourself known. You've got to put yourself in a position where, players can hear you. But like, that's the first time I was like, oh, okay, that's the intensity and the energy we keep hearing about. And that, that was good to see. I think that was really like, a first time introduction for us, because when it was rookie camp last week, yes, we hear about Ben Johnson being intense, but these guys their heads are spinning. He's now with the vets too, who have been through practices and, know the drill. How does he command that leadership, not only with young players, but older players? And I think you got a chance to see a little bit of that today. And hopefully we'll have a chance over the next couple of weeks to take the temperature more on how he does that.
Yeah, Ben Johnson, very intense from the very beginning. We do want to let you guys know today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast is brought to you by the Advantage Dealer Group. Find your next Chevy, Toyota, or Acura and drive off in under 60 minutes, or they'll make your first car payment. Also brought to you by the Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana. Las Vegas style gaming, just 30 minutes from Soldier Field, exit 6, right off of I-80 94. One other thing that I thought was just completely out of the norm for what we've seen over the past few seasons, Courtney, was we get into the press conference. Ben Johnson, of course, opens up with his opening statement and then immediately goes, I heard my quarterback's been in the news. I'm going to address it right now. we're going to talk about this and get this out of the way. And then goes on to talk about how that happened before I was here. Since he's been here, he's been nothing but a hard worker. From what I hear from his people, he was nothing but a hard worker last season. Like all of these things where it's just like, he's getting ahead of everything that, I mean, we still ask the questions, right? But he's getting ahead of most of the questions that are going to be asked versus when things would pop up with Matt Eberflus. And there was a ton talked about Matt Eberflus last season and all of the news last year. When those things would pop up, Matt would say, yeah, we talked with Jalen about that. And, we're going to keep those conversations internal, but it is what it is. Yeah, we talked with Kyler. We talked with Cole about that. And, it is what it is. We're going to keep that internal, but we've got that worked out. But then we saw on the field, clearly it wasn't worked out. And clearly these were still issues that were playing out. Seeing a head coach get ahead of the issues, I can't even tell you the last head coach we had that was bought in on that philosophy.
And the fact that he told us, like, he did have a conversation. He did feel the need to have the conversation with Caleb last week. The excerpt from Seth Wickersham's book comes out. There's a lot that was said. Caleb volunteered information that, paints his rookie season, paints this organization, their view of this organization in a negative light. Now, no one's saying he's wrong. I'm sure if you got Ben Johnson off to the side and got his real opinion, he'd probably be like, yeah, this was a bad setup for him. That's why I'm here. So I get, I get, like, I feel it's like that part of it's kind of like, that's the old news. Like, yes, Caleb said these things, he felt these things, but I was brought in to be his head coach to get him on track. So in doing that, in saying what he said, he protected his quarterback because the Bears did not make Caleb Williams available. Ben Johnson had to, bear the brunt of this today because it's the first time we've had a chance to talk with him publicly, or first time he's spoken, to a larger group publicly since this whole thing happened. I think he went on Colin Cowherd's show last
almost right after it broke.
Yeah, but he didn't say much then. Like, he kind of reiterated some of the same talking points. Look, I wasn't here. That's a different staff, but like, Caleb's a hard worker, and he called the 4 months they've been working together outstanding. I think all of that holds true, but you're right, because the change that you saw today didn't just happen on the field. The change you saw from the head coach at the podium of being proactive instead of reactive, that goes a long way in setting the tone of the organization, the type of organization you want to become with Ben Johnson as your head coach. So he didn't shy away from anything either. I think that was really interesting. Like, he answered multiple questions about this and the idea that Chicago, Caleb Williams' father, Carl, told Seth Wickersham is that, the trepidation they had about him getting drafted to Chicago is based on the organization's history and inability of being able to draft and develop franchise quarterbacks. And of course he steals and tweaks the Musha Muhammad line of Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die. Johnson viewed that as a challenge. And I think that that's something that should excite Bears fans, that you have a head coach who's not like, oh, like, I'm just not even going to talk about that. That's his opinion, whatever. He's like, no, like, I love the opportunity to change the narrative there. And that, great stories are built right now. Like, I thought he handled it like probably as well as you could have for something that was certainly controversial, certainly was, hanging over this franchise for the last week or so. And now him handling it makes it like, if you let this thing linger, then it becomes a bigger story. The way that he handled it today shows me somebody who has the leadership to not only have the right scheme in place. It's going to take this offense to where it needs to go, but knows how to lead people and knows how to support people while also getting his message across. Like what he said about Caleb, he's like, he's his own man. And he's entitled to that, which, he said that. And then he pointed to the future saying, look, we're both looking forward to turning the page. So it's addressing, hey, my quarterback that I work with now really struggled last year and didn't feel heard, didn't feel seen, did not feel he had the right coaching. I acknowledge that, but we're also moving on. Like, I think if you would have just brushed it aside, that would have been the worst possible thing you could have done dealing with your first quote unquote controversy as a head coach of this franchise. Because it won't be the last, but I thought the way he handled it was, different. We're not used to that as people who cover the team.
I think you hit the nail on the head too, Courtney, because you talk about, protecting your quarterback and getting ahead of it, right? Caleb Williams could have spoken today, and there's some people that are like, why don't you speak on this? Why don't you get ahead of this? Why don't you? Ben Johnson's not letting his young quarterback take those daggers this early on. That's something else that I thought was different. And maybe Caleb could have spoken, maybe he could have addressed it and could have talked about it because, by the time we actually get to hear from him, it'll probably be, maybe it's next week at OTAs, or maybe it's, by the time
it's supposed to be a mandatory mini camp. I don't know if that's a PR strategy. They usually have him talk they have the quarterback talk once during the off season. I personally, if you were to ask me of like a non-biased approach to this, I think that's reigniting a story weeks later when you could just nip it in the bud today. Ben Johnson doing that was enough for right now, but Caleb will be asked about these things. And I want to spin it forward because I want to know, all right, you claim that you didn't know how to watch film last year. Nobody watched it with you. How does Ben Johnson want you to watch it? And I think, without him really getting into much detail, he said that he teaches his quarterbacks how to watch film based on places he's been, strategies he's used. But what are those strategies? What does he see that he wants you to see? That's what I want to know from Caleb Williams, because apparently it is weird because the guy won a Heisman Trophy and was a great quarterback in college. Clearly something about watching film. You didn't just get here on vibes and talent. But I would like to know more of, when he does talk about it, what is Ben Johnson teaching you to watch for? What do you have to be cognizant about when you're watching a defense? It's obviously the first rule of watching film: take your eye off the ball. Then what? Then what is he asking you to do? Because it's so much more nuanced and complex than I think most people realize. I want to know how Caleb's being taught to do that, because this is the time of year where Ben talks about making mistakes on the field. Make mistakes in the classroom when you're going through the educational process of learning, hey, Ben wants me to watch it this way. I better make sure I do that now. So in November, we're not having any sort of disconnect of, wait, we talked about this in the meeting room. We saw it on film. Why did you make this mistake in the game when I showed you exactly what I was looking for? I think that's the most compelling part of what comes from this story going forward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I said that was the biggest part, that nobody was in these rooms watching film with them, how the Bears were trying to quiet everybody around them and not have a bunch of voices in Caleb Williams' ear. Meanwhile, Thomas Brown gets introduced to us and he basically goes, yeah, I've never really talked to Caleb. What are you talking about? It's week 14. You're the quarterback's coach. How have you never talked to Caleb Williams? I think those things being different this upcoming season will, of course, help Caleb Williams. Having Case Keenum in the room will help Caleb Williams. But the thing that I like about how Ben Johnson handled this is, by the time we do get the opportunity to ask him, it will be just about, okay, from that, now where are you at? Versus right now, everything is hot around. You didn't want to come to Chicago. Why didn't you want to come to Chicago? Why do you want to be here now? Right. I like the fact that Ben Johnson got ahead of this and he was like, that was then, and we're moving forward on this. And I'm the one that you're going to direct your daggers at right now, because Caleb is focused on learning a new system, learning new schemes, learning all these different things that are going to happen, learning new footwork. With how Ben Johnson has changed up the footwork, I need him focused on only that. I like this as a head coach, as the media person, right? I want to hear from Caleb Williams, but as the Chicago Bears fan, as the football fan.
I think a lot of Bears fans do. And, if you're going to make these comments in a book and what's coming out, at some point you're going to have to own it. I don't think that people blame him for what he said. I think it's just that people want to hear, hey, where's your mind at now? Because now is what matters. The past is in the past. People want to know, what is this relationship looking like as you're building it with Ben Johnson? I thought Ben talked about it when he said, the more that we're together, the more that we talk, the better I feel. That's a pretty strong statement from the head coach, that he feels like they're getting on the right page at this part of the offseason, instead of no, we're still taking time to build our bond. We'll see where it goes. Not putting any declarations out there. Him saying, I feel better the more I'm with this guy, the more I talk to him, shows you that, at least as of right now, they've got the same prerogative moving into the next part of the offseason.
Yeah, 100%. I'm excited to see how Ben and Caleb end up working together. And I think that this is going to still be a story. Anytime Caleb Williams has a rough game or there's any adversity, people are going to bring this up.
He invited that upon himself. And that's fair or not, that's what Bears fans are going to look at. If he struggles, they're going to be like, you don't want to be here anyways. But I think his head coach did him a solid today in the way 100%. That he I wouldn't say deflected, because I didn't get that vibe. I was honestly like, whoa, okay. Like the way that
I thought he took it head on. I thought he was like, we're going to have this conversation. We're not hiding from it. This happened.
Yeah, I think the word I'm probably looking for is, it didn't feel like he downplayed it. Like he acknowledged, Caleb made these comments. We talked about it. Right, wrong, and different, that happened. But how can I, what can we do to move forward out of this? That's a different feel, and that's change that Ben Johnson's bringing to the relationship part. Like, he's talked about it before, that you have to coach players differently. How do you have to coach the person who, has more weight on him, entering his second season than anybody else in the franchise? Like, that's a different level of coaching that he has to provide to Caleb, that I think, he's giving us a glimpse into. It's not just the on the field stuff too. Like, it's everything that's all encompassing when you're trying to become a franchise quarterback, that I think you have to be prepared for. And clearly, from, an early part of his career as a head coach, Ben Johnson knows that that's going to that some of that stuff's going to fall on him too, and how he protects his quarterback, not just what happens in games.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing that I thought was very interesting, just getting to the practice field here, was we got to see Jaquan Brisker back out there for the first time in a long time. I was excited about that. Looked like he was moving well. Looked like he was feeling good. Some of the other injury things that did happen, though, we find out Luther Burden. We probably I spent most of the practice like, where the heck is Luther Burden? Like, I thought it was a contract thing until I saw Ozzie Trapillo out there, and we saw Shamar Turner. I was like, okay, is he hurt? And we did find out he's dealing with a soft tissue injury. Don't know if this is from, what popped up at OTAs. I think that was him or rookie minicamp, just him landing on the football, but already dealing with
he didn't move around well the next day. Like, there were a couple moments during individuals where, and it was a short practice, but I thought back to that. I'm like, is this from the same thing that you're talking about, that pass that he caught in 7-on-7 at the end of practice on that Saturday? Then on Mother's Day, he's not moving around very well. There were a couple moments where he dropped a couple passes, looked like he was kind of laboring. I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but hearing your guy has a soft tissue injury, your second highest draft pick, your top second rounder, because he had 3 of them, and then hearing that it could be a little bit like there was, I don't know exactly how he phrased. I
believe how he phrased it was, we're waiting to hear when he gets back.
Yeah, it remains to be seen when we'll get him back. Like, you hear that, and it's like, okay, like, is this something soft tissue? Like, we've been down this road before with this team and soft tissue injuries, and what does that look like in the off season? Another change here, as my light just goes out. Like, Flus would not have. Remember how he handled injuries in the offseason? Like, until they have to give out an injury report, it was under lock and key, and week to week, day to day, whatever designations. I thought that Ben Johnson, in the way that he handled it today, telling us what it is, soft tissue injury, and saying, it might be a little bit before we get him back. That's pretty forthcoming. Is it alarming? A little bit, because you want to get your number 3 receiver worked into the mix, and now's the time to do that. And I would imagine he's probably still, he's still around. We just didn't see him in practice today. But how severe is this? You would think a soft tissue injury won't be something that keeps him out, for training camp by any means. That'd be pretty significant, but it didn't sound like he's going to be back for the next part of OTAs. And of course they have mandatory camp in 2 weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah, that is the concern with Luther Burden. I don't know if I'm too worried. This could have been something that came up. Remember, they've been here for 6 weeks, essentially. They've been here for phase 2 of the process where, we don't get to be there for that, but they're on the field working. This could have popped up at any moment where he's dealing with some of these things. Hopefully we see him back next week. But the beginning part where we're at right now, the one thing that did stand out in my mind when hearing, okay, Luther Burden is dealing with some injuries, is seeing some of the pieces that you brought in actually perform today. I thought Devin Duvernay had a nice reception today. I thought Olamide Zaccheaus had a couple of nice reps. And of course, you've already got Roma Dunze and DJ Moore on the field, both who made some nice catches today from Caleb Williams. Today really spoke to the depth that this team had. I get it, it's early on, but when you hear Luther Burden's dealing with a soft tissue injury and you kind of spent practice, not to say you didn't notice them, but it didn't feel like, okay, this offense is falling apart without one of their better wide receivers.
Yeah, and I mean, on some teams, that might be your top wide receiver. If this was 2022, he would have been the top wide receiver on this team. So to not have him would be pretty alarming. But the depth part here, like they're a deeper team than they've been since Ryan Poles became the general manager. And that's a good thing because they've been building towards that. They've been building towards having the type of players that when there is an absence, certainly it'll be noticeable for a number of different reasons. But it's not like it affects the offense to where you can't run it or you can't run certain plays. And this is day 2 of the install. So they're still very vanilla and they're learning, but it's not to say that he wasn't missed out there, but it just felt like they kind of kept moving. And there's a lot of guys on this roster right now, a lot of receivers, that receiver depth chart's going to look like 4, 5, and potentially 6. I mean, you mentioned Devin Duvernay, who has the special teams returner, pedigree that he brings to the table. What about, behind him was Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus also plays in the slot. That's kind of where Luther Burden projects to probably play most of his snaps as a rookie. Now's a chance for those guys to get in the mix while the rookie's out. But what you hope is going on behind the scenes, if you're a Bears fan, is the learning process, making sure that he doesn't fall behind as everybody else is on the field. And it's clear that Rome Odunze has taken everything he needed to do this offseason to heart and how seriously. Like, he made an incredible catch on an intermediate route. I believe it was in 7-on-7, like in the earlier portion of practice. What Ben Johnson said about him, how you can tell his work ethic is like a seasoned pro and that he's, one of the best he's been around. To make a declaration like that when you've been with the guy for a couple of weeks, kind of highlights what's going on and how this team really feels about Rome Odunze. So those are good things that I think the Bears are excited about. But, with Burden, he's young. Like, he's going to be one of the younger guys in that room. Now is really when you can't afford to not be, ingrained
out there, not getting the action, not getting it in live action.
Sure. And I mean, it just, you hope that he's learning behind the scenes and that he's able to then translate it onto the field, because it's a big learning curve when you go from playing receiver in college to playing receiver in the NFL. Yes, I know most people will say, oh, well, it's one of the easier positions to translate. This is not exactly an easy offense. So I'm curious, there's going to be blocking assignments that you're responsible for. And those are things you won't be able to truly execute. You can learn it in the meeting room, but what happens when you have to get on the field, when you haven't been on the field for a little bit? So we'll see. But that was eye-opening today, not see him out there. Obviously, there's some other absences. Kyler Gordon, I believe, is out of the country. Andrew Billings, didn't see him out there, did not see Ryan Bates. It's voluntary. It's weird that it's voluntary because we focus on the guys who aren't there versus the ones sometimes who are. But I think they had really good attendance. Like, for the most part, you don't have, there's nobody that you can point to. It's like, oh, guy's probably a contract hold in eventually. Like, they just handled the Joe Tooney deal. Like, they've handled their business where they needed to. And I don't know. I felt like the vibe that the players had today in responding to the type of coaching they were getting, some very hands-on coaching and drills too, was a good tone setter for this team at the day 2 of practice when everybody's together.
Yeah, and listen, I think now it's very early on, right? Where is it when it's 2 months or 3 months of hearing somebody's voice in that manner? But the thing that I saw half of the world worried about when the Eric Bieniemy clip came out of him, yelling at the young guys, "Oh my God, you think it's still a method of coaching to scream at a guy while he's on the field?" Everybody who was out there today probably got yelled at least once, and every one of them took it in stride. It was like, let me get back to the huddle. Let's do this the right way. Let's readjust. I saw Eric Bieniemy going at Roshan Johnson and DeAndre Swift the same way he was going at the rookies. We saw Ben Johnson blow up a couple of times. Those are the things that you're trying to do things differently than what you have done. And you saw almost none of those moments last season where, not to say it felt like they were worried about it, but it did feel like, okay, they knew there were cameras around, of course, because of Hard Knocks last year, or they didn't want a bad look to be out there in front of the media. It doesn't seem like the Chicago Bears coaching staff currently cares at all about the PR of how this thing looks. They only care about the winning process. And that's something that Bears fans should be excited for with this coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, and Ben Johnson's reiterated that a lot. He keeps saying, this is the time of year that you're supposed to make mistakes. But, when he said, some details fell by the wayside, you got to call it out.
Yep.
You got to call out what you're seeing in real time if you want to be about what you said you were going to be about. So that's him holding up his end of the deal. Like, you can have mental errors, but you're probably going to hear about it, because if you don't call it out, if you don't correct it, then it's going to keep happening. And I think that, I'd be curious to see by the time that last OTA rolls around, how are guys responding to coaching? Are they still making little mistakes? Are there still areas where guys are not lining up properly? Usually those things get sorted out. I don't like to put too much stock into this time of the year. I was actually following the Jets OTAs today, and I was like really almost turned off by some of the reporting that came out. Like, wow, this guy's having a terrific day. They're not in pads, and this guy is a defensive lineman. He's, let's see in August if this guy is, is great of a pass rusher as he's being made out to be. I don't even know who it was. I just remember seeing that. I'm like, let's chill and pull the reins back a little bit. And I feel like Ben Johnson kind of has that same, it's about body language right now at this time of year. It's about the buy-in, and that's,
he talked about his body language. He talked about, I got to have better body language.
I thought that was interesting, because I'm like, everybody talks about how intense he is, and I agree, but it's not like a constant barrage of yelling, of jumping around, of getting in guys' faces. Like, it's moments. You got to watch for them, because when they happen, it goes like 0 to 100 very quickly and then comes back down. But, I thought his body language was fine. I thought that was like, I didn't think that was an issue at all. And I know he said he would talk to players, and that's something that he's told them that, like, that he wants to adhere to too, but I didn't think it was a bad thing at all.
No, listen, I think it is. What I think Ben Johnson is trying to focus on in that moment is, you don't want the yelling to fall on deaf ears, because that is when the coaching becomes nothing. You're just screaming at us to scream. Like, you just walked in the door today, wanted to kick in the door and start yelling. And so I think that's probably why he's saying, I've talked with players about that in the past, where it's for a reason and different things like that. But I love how Ben Johnson has gone about it. I think he's tried to teach in moments like you said, he's walking up and down the sideline with Caleb Williams. He's telling him, he's teaching him different things about the system in those moments. And then when he does get excited, it's because he feels you should know this. Like, this is something that you should know when you're lining up already. We shouldn't be making this mistake here. It's not meaningless popping off. It is something that is actually impactful, I believe, for this team. And I think you'll see it on the field. And I'll tell you what, they asked for the accountability. When somebody speaks up in that manner and is trying to hold you accountable, you saw Cole Kmet got yelled at. Courtney, I don't think Cole Kmet's ever been yelled at.
Yeah, vets are not immune, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, to be able to, like, hold everybody accountable. And sometimes it's hard to tell, like, was this person angry? Was this a bad exchange? Like, bad exchange between two people? Was there more to this? But there was a moment, like, I saw, like, Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams walking across the field, and, like, Ben was, like, tugging at Caleb's sleeve, and Caleb kept walking. I don't know if that was just him trying to catch up with him. I don't think there was anything, like, negative going on, but it's hard to dissect what's going on in these moments. It was clear, though, when Cole lined up wrong, that Ben snapped at him to a degree.
Yeah.
But it wasn't malicious. It was, hey, like, it's going to mess up the whole play if we do it this way, so we're not going to do it. We're going to correct it right now. And lo and behold, they got it figured out for the next time that they ran it. So I think that's when we talk about body language and you talk about, like, personality and what a coach is going to be like and how players respond. I think it's in those moments right after the coaching point happens and right after somebody may raise their voice, that is, like, that's where you can tell, like, the true growth. If it happens, will happen right there, because then the same mistake won't be played out.
Yeah, and you saw it. They go back to the huddle. They run the next play. Caleb throws it. I think it was a short pass to the left side that ended up being a nice dot in there to DJ Moore, and DJ takes it down the sideline.
Yeah, it's a tight window throw. I thought that was probably his best throw of the day.
100%. Yeah, that was the one that really stood out. I mean, he tight window throw, got it into DJ. DJ took off now. Yeah. I don't know if you saw this at the end of it, because you kind of, when we're in there, the vantage point is a little tough.
He absolutely slowed
up, got the ball punched out by the DB. I mean, like, hey, let's finish that off. But even that, seeing players finish off for J-Mac always says, as a running back, you need to be running down the field, finishing your route or running to the end zone, because that's where you need to end up. Roschon Johnson did that multiple times today. DeAndre Swift did that multiple times. This coaching staff is coming about the actions that we're seeing on this team. Very, very different. A couple other things I did want to get to on today's episode. Case Keenum got the first second team reps with the second unit when they were going up against the second unit in there. Now they did swap out after that. I think Tyson Bagent got a couple of reps in there with the second unit as well. But could we see a change in the backup quarterback possibly coming here with Case Keenum? Or is this just, we got to get Case comfortable with the system so that he can catch up to this?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, Tyson Bagent is their number 2 quarterback. They've maintained that even when Case Keenum came in and was signed as the number 3, there wouldn't be a change to the quarterback order. I think right now, I mean, look, there were bits and pieces of the offensive line that were moving around where Darnell Wright's working with the second team, and he's obviously at right tackle still, but they're going to be mixing guys in and out for the offensive line combination throughout the next couple months, or at least certainly the spring. I'm sure we'll see some of that in training camp, even though they did say they want to make sure that by training camp, they want to have something set and then not mess around with it. So that'll be interesting to watch, but I do not think that there's anything to be concerned about there as far as a backup quarterback competition.
No backup quarterback competition. Something else that I saw today, Courtney Cronin got first crack at the first team reps at left tackle. We know Ozzie Trapilo is also going to get some work over there on the left side. I actually saw Jordan McFadden get a little bit work in early on at that left tackle position with the number 2s. Trapilo came in, kind of worked in a couple of reps with the 2s, spent some with the 3s as well, so he was moving around. But Courtney, first look today, first rep today. I don't know if he was banged up. Waddle kept going. He seems like he's limping a little bit, but the ball was snapped. He didn't move. That was the first look at Courtney at the left tackle spot. It didn't feel like a great start to the left tackle competition right there on Courtney's part.
He'll have a lot of reps, though. I mean, that's the silver lining for him because Braxton Jones is still dealing with his rehab of his ankle. It's going to be a while, probably before he gets anywhere near ready to be, in the mix. So that sort of thing, I think, is, for Crown having the first crack at first team reps, this guy wasn't practicing at this time last year. His career started, midway through his rookie season because he was dealing with injury and then obviously didn't get off to a great start. So this is him rewriting, kind of clean slate approach to what he's gone through so far as a young player. So if there's issues, I mean, I didn't see the play that you're talking about in specific. I did see him working in on quite a bit at, obviously with the first team and left tackle. We know what it is. I mean, there's 4 spots that are set right now. I start to think that Darnell Wright, not start to think, but the more that it's been talked about, the more that we have heard about Ozzie Trapilo, we'll have to figure out how he actually says his name because I know we've heard 15 different variations of it.
I think it's Trapilo.
I think it is too. Regardless, I just think that they're going to have one competition to not have to move around another spot. But then again, it's still early. Maybe it's just because the early part of the install, they're like, Darnell, you stay at right tackle. We'll try to work you in at left if they really are serious about that. We don't know yet. So, today was a hard day, I think, to take stuff away from the offensive line because they were moving a lot of pieces, especially with the second and third team units, a lot of pieces in and out. And they really, they're in shorts. They're not doing too much with 11 on 11 just yet.
No, not at all. If you're taking something away from today's offensive line looks, there were times where I looked out there and Jordan McFadden was the starting left guard. We know Joe Tooney's going to be over there starting left with the number 1s at left guard. There were times where Case Keenum was behind the number 1 offensive line. They're mixing things up. They're going through the process of, well, this may happen during the season if X, Y, and Z goes down, if this guy gets hurt, if this happens. So you have to prepare for all those scenarios. I'll finish it out with this, Courtney. I did have my one meathead moment of the day. Caleb Williams started off. He was doing the handoff drills. He handed the football off to DeAndre Swift, and then everybody else went through. Tyson Bagent handed it off to Roschon. Case Keenum handed it off to 35, who his name's escaping me right now. And then Caleb Williams came back in, just getting those early touches with Kyle Monangai. He might be a piece. Everybody's saying 7th round pick. We don't know if he's going to be on the team. Does he even make it? Don't sleep on Kyle Monangai. I know that may not really be the case, but that was my meathead moment of the day where I was like, getting some early work in with Caleb Williams. I like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to rotate those backs through. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's not nearly as many as I think they want. I think they said like upwards of like 6 or 7 is what the goal is for training camp. But, for a rookie to get those, to get any work with the starting quarterback is beneficial at any time of the year. And, this was somebody who, my biggest takeaway from him and really all the running backs that we saw, the 3 of them at rookie minicamp, were they're really struggling to catch the ball. So we didn't get to see much of that today, but as that progresses, I think you'll figure out which running backs are like best suited for Ben Johnson's offense. If it happens to be the rookie, then they hit on a 7th round pick and they should feel good about that.
Yeah. The only opportunity I think really today where Monaga really got a shot at it in 11 on 11 was there was a turnaround handoff. And I don't know who missed the assignment, but Shamar Turner was in the backfield quick. And that play was blown dead immediately. So, listen, it's day 2 of OTAs. There's not a ton you can take away, but there's a lot of things that you can learn about the coaching staff. And I think about just kind of the mindset this team wants to go into training camp, into minicamp with. And so excited about a lot of the stuff that we saw from Ben Johnson, excited about a lot of the stuff that the team put on display today, and excited for the fact that they actually ran a real practice on day 1 or on day 2, I should say, that we were out there. So let us know how you guys feel about all the stuff from OTAs today in the comments below. We'll be down there talking with you guys as well. As always, for Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat the Designer. Back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bread Don, one love. Peace.